Good evening. This evening is our monthly meeting of the Board of Adjustment. While we are having to change how we operate, we are still committed to a transparent process and encouragement of public comment during our meetings. We will be accepting testimony from parties. If you wish to testify on any particular petition before us this evening, use the Zoom feature. Please use the raise hand feature. You can raise your hand at any time and we will recognize you at the appropriate time for the presentation of evidence for each case. If in person, please hand staff your speaker's card. Senior Planner Travis Newberry will be moderating the hybrid meeting and will be asked to provide names of those individuals that wish to speak. I would like to call the meeting of the City of Wildwood's Board of Adjustment to order. Board members present today are Bob Morris, board member, Jim Van Nest, board member, Arnie Sprunger, board member, Jim Rubis, alternate member, and myself, Jared Frank, chair. The Department of Planning staff present is Joe Budich, Director of Planning, Travis Newberry, Senior Planner, and Robin Keefe, Planner. City Attorney John Young and Court Reporter Courtney Tallman are also. First, I offer into the record the affidavit of publication pertaining to today's meeting, May 18, 2023, and take official notice of the zoning ordinance of City of Wildwood, including Chapter 400, Article 2, authorizing and establishing the Board of Adjustment's powers and duties. Now let me explain the hearing procedure. Please be aware the information I'm about to describe is also provided on the Board of Adjustment Public Hearing Procedure handout, which is available online prior and to tonight's meeting. This hearing is informal in its nature. However, the meeting's proceedings will be recorded by a reporter for future transcription. The petitions are called in the order listed on the agenda. As the petition is called, I will ask the Department of Planning staff member to read each request into the record. Thereafter, the Department of Planning will have opening remarks and a brief slide presentation. Then the petitioner or his or her representative will be asked to state their name, address, and be sworn in by the court reporter, make a brief presentation to the board, explain the nature of the requested variance, and present such evidence and witness testimony that may evidence the practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship that warrant the variance. The board will only consider the unique character of the property to determine whether they warrant the granting of the variance. Board members may ask questions to clarify the facts of the petitioner's presentation. When the board is satisfied with the material presented by the petitioner, the chair will then ask if there is anyone present or online who would like to speak in favor or opposition to the requested variance. Each speaker will be asked to provide their name and address, be sworn in, and then provide their evidence and testimony. Procedurally, the petitioner may request a continuance at any time during the hearing prior to a call for the vote in order to bring additional evidence or testimony. The board may also continue the proceedings. After the submission of testimony and evidence from all interested parties, the board will ask a staff person to provide the Department of Planning's report on this matter. If requested by any member of the board, the petitioner, or any individual who is participating in person or online. Once all witnesses have been heard, the chair will call for a motion to grant or deny with or without conditions, then the board will vote. At that time, the presentation of evidence relating to the petition is concluded and no further evidence will be permitted. The board may make a decision today. 4 members of the board must vote in favor of the variance for it to be approved. If a variance is approved, the petitioner has 6 months to obtain the necessary permits or establish the use, or it will expire. If the board's decision is unfavorable, the petitioner has the right of appeal to the St. Louis County Circuit Court. This appeal must be done within 30 days of the decision. Mr. Newberry, are there any questions at this time?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chair.
Hearing no questions, the meeting will proceed. Stevens, please read the first request into the record, which will be followed by a brief slide presentation.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, the first item tonight is BA 7-23, James and Mary Fears, 16204 Marina Del Rey Lane, Wildwood, Missouri 63040. Request an exception to the minimum yard requirements general. Excuse me. And the requirements set forth in the approved planned environment unit, PEU ordinance number 12935, for the purpose of replacing an existing railroad tie retaining wall with a stone block tie, which will have a maximum height of 9 feet upon the property located at 16204 Marina Del Rey, located number 24U 510453, Farthers at Lake Chesterfield Edition, lot 85, thereby authorizing a northern side yard setback distance of 3 feet in lieu of 6 feet and a front yard setback distance of 17 feet in lieu of 20 feet. This request is contrary to the requirement, chapter 415.140 R3 10,000 square foot resident district regulations of the city of Wildwood zoning ordinance and planned environment unit, PEU, ordinance number 12935, approved by the St. Louis County Council in 1987. This case was advertised on April 27, 2023 meeting agenda that was postponed to the May meeting. This property is located in Ward 7. Mr. Chair, before Ms. Heath comes forward to provide the slide presentation, the department would like to enter into the record the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance. The file that has been developed and maintained regarding this particular request and all contents contained therein, including the department's report. And then finally, Mr. Chair, the evidence and testimony provided as part of tonight's public hearing on this particular request. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening. Mr. Chair and members of the board, our first case involves a property that is located in southeastern Wildwood in the Lake Chesterfield Addition, which is a 158 lot subdivision, which was platted prior to the city's incorporation in 1987. It is an approved planned environment unit approved by St. Louis County, which is characterized by smaller lots that are clustered around large tracts of common area. This particular property is about a 1/4 acre in size. It abuts the east side of Marina Del Rey Lane, a publicly maintained roadway. It is occupied by a single family dwelling and also an existing railroad tie retaining wall, which is the subject of this variance request this evening. This property is zoned R3 10,000 square foot residence district, which requires a 20-foot front yard setback distance and a 6-foot side yard setback distance. The lot descends in slope from the front to the rear of it, about 14 feet total. It is primarily grassy turf area, but there are some intermittent trees as well. Here you can see the wall in question. It is the bold black line. The petitioner is requesting to replace this existing wall, which was built at the same time as the residence, with a stone block type of it. And they are requesting a 17-foot front yard setback in lieu of the 20 feet and a 3-foot side yard setback distance in lieu of the 6 feet in order to do so. This is the front of the residence looking east. This is looking down Marina Del Rey Lane, looking south. And this is looking north. This is the existing retaining wall area. This is the neighboring residence, and this is the petitioner's residence. And we are looking east. This is a closer up view of that wall, looking south. And this is looking north. Again, this is the neighboring residence, and this is the petitioner's residence. This is looking at the retaining wall from the rear. So we're looking west at this point towards Marina Del Rey Lane. This is the other side yard on the other side of the house, looking east. And then this gives you a sense of the rear yard. This is looking south. And this is looking north. The department did receive one comment in support of this request today. It was forwarded to you earlier. However, there are no other variances to mention at this time. So this concludes our presentation, and of course, the department is available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keith. This time, the petitioner please come forward, state his or her name, address, relation to the property, and then be sworn in by the court reporter.
James W. Fears, 16204 Marina Del Rey Lane.
Please raise your right hand. Solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fears. Could you please state the nature of your request, the hardship or practical difficulty necessitating the variance as it relates to the character of the property only?
The way the home was built originally, the lay of the land, I guess the builder had to put the wall up to separate the property to some degree from the neighboring property. It's a railroad tie wall. It's been in place since 1990, deteriorating. There really isn't any other way to replace the wall other than just to take it down and put up a block wall without changing the lay of the front property totally. That would be probably something that would be way beyond what the cost would be associated with. So just would like to take the old wall down and replace it with the new stone wall.
Anything else? Anything else?
No, that's it.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Rubus?
That infringe into the setbacks now?
No, it does not.
Mr. Rubus?
That I can't tell you. I don't know. I mean, it's basically the tie wall is going to come down and the stone wall is going to go back up.
Cover the same area.
As far as I could tell, more than likely it will cover the same area. The stone itself may be a little bit wider than what the railroad ties are, but I don't really see the necessity for a 3-foot setback. I mean, I think it's going to be.
So you're Lacey.
I can't understand who's talking.
Make sure your microphone's closer if you could. Courtney can hear you. Mr. Rubus is still listener's question, Courtney.
Is the stone wall going to extend past where into the setback, front setback, any more than the ties are now?
That I can't answer. My contractor is not here. I haven't seen the plans that he's drawn up, but it's really supposed to tie into the existing stone that's in the front already. So I wouldn't see that it would be any closer to the street. And notice they said a 17-foot setback instead of 20. I don't know where the extra 3 feet came from. Like I say, I haven't seen the drawing from my contractor, but I wouldn't suspect would be any further out than what it is right now.
Okay, and you said it'll tie into where the existing stone is today.
That's our plan, is to tie the stone into the existing stone
Okay,
that's already
and that
there.
existing stone, is that your property?
Oh, yes. Everything is on my property.
Okay.
Any additional questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, Absolutely.
Just to follow up on Board Member Rubus's question. So the 17-foot setback variance request had to do with the plans that were submitted to the department with the Board of Adjustment application. So that is where that number came from. And my understanding is this is a replacement of the wall. A variance is needed in this case. It's an existing non-conforming wall that we are replacing and making conforming. Yes.
Mr. Rubus, okay. This time, any speakers in the audience that may want to speak in favor or opposition to this request?
Mr. Chair, the department has not received any speaker cards and there are a few online, but no one has raised their hand.
Would anybody like to hear an oral presentation of the department's report? Seeing none. Any final comments from the Department of Planning?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The department is supporting this request this evening. Given that this wall is already existing and the type proposed should be an improvement, we feel that this warrants the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final comments from the board? Seeing none, at this time, we will close the proceeding for a vote. May I have a motion to approve, a motion to deny, or a motion to approve with conditions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sprunger. Do I have a second to Mr. Sprunger's?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Rubus. Mr. Morris, how do you vote?
Approve.
Mr. Van Nest?
Approve.
Mr. Sprunger?
Approve.
Mr. Rubus?
Approve.
And I approve as well. Congratulations, your variance is approved.
Thank you very much. What's the next step in the process? Does it go to St. Louis County at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Fears. Director Vunich, I think we're ready for the second petition.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the board, the second item on tonight's agenda is BA 9-23, Matthew and Jamie Otzenberger, 5017 Eagle Wing Court, Eureka, Missouri, 63025. Request an exception to the miscellaneous regulations of the city of the zoning ordinance, which states no accessory land use or development shall be established until a primary activity or structure is in place on the same lot for the purpose of constructing a permanent accessory building on an existing 12-foot by 27-foot concrete pad without first the establishment of the primary activity or structure. This accessory structure is to be utilized for the storage of materials prior to the proposed primary activity or structure, a single-family dwelling being built upon the property located at 4437 Fox Creek Road, locator number 27Y120022. This request is contrary to the requirements of Chapter 415.380 miscellaneous regulations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, Chapter 415.090 NU non-urban resident district regulations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, and Chapter 415.070 FP NU floodplain non-urban district regulations. This particular property is located in Ward 6. And again, Mr. Chair, with your permission, the department would like to enter into the record the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance. The file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request and all contents contained therein, including the department's report with recommendation. And then finally, any evidence or testimony that is offered as part of tonight's hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Vunich. This time, the director or the planning staff may any notes or comments pertain to the petition We'll do a followed by a brief presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Our second case this evening is located in southwestern Wildwood, south of Highway 100 and off of Fox Creek Road, just to the west of it. The lot in question is 4.4 acres in size, and access is via a private roadway, which I'm sure will be a topic of conversation this evening. It is somewhat uniquely shaped in that there is very minimal frontage onto Fox Creek Road, and then the primary property is back behind it to the west. The property is hilly and rugged in terrain. And it is partially located in a floodplain with about 25% of it in the floodplain. The subject site is not occupied at the moment by a dwelling. However, it does have a clearing associated with it, which is the location of a previous outbuilding, which is the subject of this request. In this clearing, the petitioner has been storing building materials, trailers, vehicles, and other items. There was an approved permit associated with this request in 2021. The permit was issued for the repair of an existing structure on the lot, which is pictured before you now. However, in present day, in this same area, this is what you see. Here we're looking northwest into this clearing area from the private roadway. And here we're looking southwest. Northwest. We're continuing to look northwest. Again, more south. And then looking westward towards the back of the property. From that area where you saw that chained entrance into the clearing area, we're now looking at the neighbor to the south. And for the purpose of just demonstrating how close the neighbor to the east is, I used the zoom feature of my camera. However, it is pretty apparent that that neighbor would see this clearing area if there was not so much foliage present. This is looking east down the private roadway access that the petitioner is currently using to this clearing area. And this is the bridge crossing onto that private roadway from Fox Run Hollow Lane. And I believe this was not an updated slide because the department has received, I believe now it's been 6 comments from direct neighbors in opposition to the request. So this neighbor, this neighbor, this neighbor, just to the south of it, these 2 lots to the west behind the property as well. There are no other variances associated with this request. And at this time, I'll conclude my presentation and turn it over to the petitioner. The department is available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keefe. At this time, the petitioner please come forward, state his or her name, address, in relation to the property, and then be sworn in by the court reporter.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I am Matt Otzenberger. I am the owner of 4437 Fox Creek Road property.
We'll get you sworn in, Mr. Otzenberger.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Otzenberger, can you please explain the nature of the request, the hardship and practical difficulty necessitating the variance?
Okay, so I appreciate all the information she gave us. Most of that is 100% accurate. She did show you the slide of the existing building as I encountered it when I purchased the property. And as you can see, it was not safe for my children to be on the property or anything else I had going on with the property, and I have like my plans to do with the property. That building does have a power drop to it and does have a well. In one of her slides, you can see the well pictured in here, and I've got additional pictures here if you like to submit it for record. I think you have the same ones or not. I think I submitted all these to you guys already, but there's a well already there. The only thing that doesn't have to meet the city requirements for a dwelling would be waste disposal. But aside from that, this was the existing structure when I encountered it. I've since cleaned this property up a ton. I went through the process of acquiring permits through St. Louis County and through the city of Wildwood to repair the structure. But when I had the county out to review this, when walking the property, they agreed. They said, this is not worth saving, this building. So the plans I submitted are to rebuild the entire structure itself. So I have an approved set of plans that show the new building, the new construction materials, which were subsequently approved. So I went ahead, purchased materials and started construction, which was mostly just, let me backtrack, pulled a permit for the clearing of low-lying scrub brush and invasive honeysuckle so that I could clear out an area to get my lay down yard and my construction materials and equipment on site. Purchased materials, got equipment out there, started clearing, pulled the permit, got the permit, and then started all the set activities. About 3 months later, the county called me and said, hey, listen, we probably shouldn't issue that permit. Now that we look into this a little further, that is not permissible because you don't have a permanent primary dwelling on the property already existing. I said, okay. They said, we're not going to pull the permit, but we would go ahead and, we'll work with you in the future on how we get around this and navigate this. I said, no problem. So I stopped construction, and that is the state you see it in the slides that she showed. So it sat like that for a while, communication back and forth. I know we got some complaints from the audience here for things on the site, but I was trying to work with the city of Wildwood for a resolution on to what I could do with this property. So from there, I stopped activities as they asked me to. They didn't put a stop work on my permit, but in good faith, because I am going to build a house or a structure on that property at some point once I get through all this. The whole intention of that shed or repair of that building, it's a 12 by 27 building, was to have a space where I could store my building materials, my tools, and my equipment safely and securely while I do develop the property for my primary residence. That's really all that I'm asking for is the variance to go forward with my building as applied for and approved. And I guess I have a couple of tickets that are associated with it because of things that were on the property, which over the course of 2 years, I moved a couple of homes and a couple of different properties, and a couple of family relatives asked if they could store, boats and materials on my property. I said, sure, no problem, because it just sat there and did nothing. So stuff did accumulate. And once I got the tickets and talked with the county, I went ahead and moved all that stuff off the property. And now all that remains are the building materials that were approved and equipment and tools.
Anything else you'd like to present?
Nope, that's it.
Any initial questions from the board?
So the size of your shed or storage building that you want to put up, how does it compare to the original?
It's the exact same footprint.
It's the exact same footprint. Okay. And that storage facility was there when you purchased the property?
Yes, sir.
But it was in the condition that
Yeah, it was in
we saw
severe
in the
disrepair.
picture.
Yeah. It was built, it was scab construction at best, 3 or 4 layers of 2x4s to build 1 6-foot stud. It was, and flat roof, which ultimately made it, the walls collapse and fall in on itself over time. I think we looked back when I was getting the permit, Steve and I looked back, I think it was just under the historical building age. I think it was like 49 years old or 48 years old at the time. So when I applied, it didn't count as a historical building. So I just barely, by the skin of my teeth, made it into rebuild or tear it down without having any historical impacts. But the intent is to go ahead and build the exact same existing pad, clear what's there out, and just build a new structure there that's safe for my family to be around when I'm out there working on my property.
How long have you owned the property for?
I've owned it for about 2 years, a little more than 2 years.
And this is a question, it may not be for you, it may be for the city, but were vacant buildings, structures that weren't primary use, like houses, was that allowed way back when in the county? Or was it never allowed?
Mr. Sprunger, for the most part, since 1965, that date is important because that's when the St. Louis County Council adopted a new master zoning ordinance and created the non-urban district.
Mhm.
Since that period, 1965, there has to be a primary use or building on a property before an accessory activity or structure is allowed. And so what I will tell you is that prior to Wildwood, and to a certain degree now, with larger lots, isolated locations, there are probably a number of outbuildings that were constructed by the property owners, not knowing that they would be in violation. And they stayed with the property. The property has now changed hands, if not once, twice, or many more times. And so they're out there. It was an isolated location far from Clayton, and for the most part, neighbors didn't necessarily see a problem. And that's why these older outbuildings are here.
Okay, so technically they were non-conforming, but because of the nature of acreage and where we live, it wasn't that big of a deal that these buildings were created, even though they weren't in compliance with St. Louis County's ordinances.
Just to put it in context, code enforcement is an important function of local government. But prior to the incorporation, take police services. I was told by the captain of the precinct, Gary Cruz, that prior to the incorporation of the city of Wildwood, there was 2 beats out here with an officer on each beat. So 67 square miles had 2 officers basically to serve the population.
All right.
So police services, an essential public safety component. So code enforcement, obviously, in this portion of the unincorporated St. Louis County was not necessarily as high a priority as it is for the city of Wildwood.
Sure. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any additional questions from the board?
I actually do have another one for you.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that as we as a board consider these variance requests is the impact that variance would have on neighboring properties. It's rather stunning that your neighbors seem to have a real problem with this.
I agree 1,000%.
Do you have any?
There's only a few pictures that she presented that kind of capture the surrounding area. And to even get to my property, the subject building, you really have to kind of work to get in there. And before Joe came out, he's like, he actually passed up the road, and I had to flag him down, kind of guide him into where we were going.
Right, sure.
It's not visible. It's very well hidden back there. And if you look at the surrounding properties, they're not $1 million homes. They're pretty well like and kind in the area. So what I'm doing is only improving my property. It is not anything. And the home I plan to build would only do the same. I mean, it would be a larger upscale home that I put on the property, which would add to the area. It would never detract from the city of Wildwood or anything, any surrounding property for sure.
So you don't feel that what you're doing in terms of building this, replacing the broken down shed, that would provide any negative visual impact to your
No,
neighborhood?
so I've been respectful to the neighbors, Orlando and Ray, about, Orlando says, please keep some of the brush between the two properties up so that, I don't see him, he doesn't see me. I've been very respectful of that. Now in the winter, when things get thin, he might see a little more than, there's a blue tarp out there covering my tools and my lawnmower on another 16-foot flatbed trailer. All of that would be cleaned up if I could get the building put on there and put the stuff inside of the building and safely store my material, my equipment. So no, I don't think that, anything I would be doing would be infringing upon anybody else in the area. I'm trying to be respectful of that. There's even maybe a 10-foot creek between the road of Fox Hollow Run and my property. So there's brush there that I can't necessarily clear out or get through and I would have no reason to. So there's another, break, a visible break there for any other road or passersby. Aside from that, the rest of my property behind is completely undeveloped. It's just got a path I cut through there with my skid steer to clear some of that low-lying scrub brush and the invasive honeysuckle, and that's it.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions, but I'm almost done.
Yeah, I'm patient.
Okay. So to be in compliance, you need to build a house.
Right.
And you say that you plan to.
Yes. I've started down that path, right? There's a couple hurdles in the way. I need to get in this type of property. What dictates where I'm going to put the house is going to be my septic system, right? So I have to have my geo team come out and tell me where I can put a house based off of the layout of the land. And then I can pick out where of course I have an area kind of scouted out with my wife where we would like to put a house. But until I can get, further out there to do that, the whole reason I applied for this in the first place was for the low-lying scrub brush removal so I could get a team out there to do it. But then we found that building and I was like, well, we'll rebuild. And I knew that, I'm an engineer, so I do this all the time for pulling permits. And if I'm going to be here presenting with you guys and trying to pull permits for a home, I'd like to do everything up front the right way first from the start. So when I found that building, I knew I was going to start repair on it or make it a space that I can actually store some of my stuff while I'm building the house. I went ahead and pulled the permit on that as well. The whole reason I wanted the low-lying scrub brush removal was so I can make a path to get back there and actually do a study of the property and figure out where my septic system or well can go. And in doing that, I've landed here. So
that being the case, what do you think would be a reasonable amount of time that you should have to be compliant? If you went ahead and built the storage facility,
sure.
Now you should be building your house. So
right.
Are you talking 20 years from now?
No.
Are you
Gosh,
talking
no.
2 years?
It would be less than 5 years for sure. I mean, I have plans already in the works, but I haven't submitted anything until I have resolution on this first. Like I said, I tried to go through the proper proceedings and get things taken care of up front. I'm not backdooring anybody on any of this. And I want to follow the same process when I go through to build my house. So I do have a building already spec'd, drawn, ready to go. I just haven't gone through a submittal of anything because before I spend a whole bunch of money, more money on this, I'd like to get resolution to the property first.
Yeah, I think there's some concern that you're going to put the facility up, shut up,
and then not do anything with it.
And then you're not going to really put your house up.
And at that point, though, I'm doing nothing more than what was already there before when I purchased the property. That's not even my argument, though. That's not the approach I'm taking. That's not at all what I'm doing. The intent absolutely is to build a house out there. A house or whatever I can, conceivably put out there.
Okay.
And if it makes any impact at all, it'd probably be around, 4,000 square foot, probably a 4-car garage or better.
Yeah.
It's not a little, shack that I plan to throw together with parts and pieces. This is not the intent of the building. What was out there was kind of that mode, and that's not the path I'm down. So,
yeah, I think what some of what I sensed in the neighbors' responses were, your commitment to actually building that home. And I'm not here to play let's make a deal or anything.
Mhm.
But let me just ask you this. If you're approved, and I probably can't even do this, but I'm going to. If you build the structure and you don't build your house within 5 years, would you be willing to tear down the structure?
Sure. I mean, the investment in the structure so far is only $5,000. It's pretty minimal. It's not that big of a deal.
Mhm.
That wouldn't be an issue at all for me. I mean,
Okay.
I've got the equipment to do it. I did it once already.
Okay. Okay.
It would not be an issue at all. I know that one of the last correspondence back and forth was to remove property off of my property, which seems counterintuitive to me, and restore the area, which again, if that's the need, then sure, fine. If that's what I have to do. That's what I have to do. I'll go start over somewhere else. I'll take my money to some other county that is more workable. I mean, I don't know what this issue here, I don't think has any issue on the neighbors at all. I mean, I'm not doing anything but adding value to the area. That is my intent. I mean, the purpose is for have a home and a place that my family can kind of have a quiet little corner and have our own little piece of land. But it's not certainly to downgrade the area or pull anything down. I mean, I don't know what other intent I would have behind pursuing this.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the intent is to store the equipment.
Mhm.
And so it's safe to say if you were to put all that equipment inside, it'd be out of sight. The reverse of that is if you don't have this, is it safe that equipment's staying?
No,
right
I'd have
where
to
it
go, I'd be
is?
forced to go buy another property somewhere and do it elsewhere. I mean, I have to do something with my materials. I
guess that's what I'm asking. So let's say you didn't purchase another property. Is it safe to assume without this structure, that stuff is staying where
yeah, I
it is?
can't go anywhere with it right now. I
Correct.
mean, I'd have to be granted some sort of time to be able to figure that out. I mean, I can't just go buy something tomorrow. I mean, there's a closing process and that whole
Sure. I
thing.
guess
So
my question was more of,
if I don't have it, yes, it
if
has
you
to
don't
stay in
have
the woods
it,
in
it-
existing
it's-
condition. Yes,
It's
sir.
going to stay in sight. of
Right.
Whoever
Yes, sir.
doesn't like it now, it's not going to go anywhere for a while if you have nowhere to put it.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is part of our responsibility in issuing a variance. We're looking for the hardship that the land presents. And you want this building to store your equipment to maybe build a house in 2 years or 3 years.
Mhm.
There's a lot of home building in Wildwood, people buying property up that don't have accessory building for their equipment.
Sure.
So what is the hardship?
The hardship in my eyes is the fact that I went through the process. I purchased them. I mean, most of that material sitting out there, if it's not my equipment and my tools, it's the material that's sitting out there that I think is probably the most eyesore. I mean, you saw the trusses that are kind of built up on a makeshift pallet so that they aren't sitting on the ground and rotting. There's a stack of material there on the pad existing that's got my plywood and my framing material. There's a stack of siding and aluminum and everything else for the roofing materials and windows and doors sitting over covered on another area. I mean, those things would be built or would be used to build the structure. Those things get cleaned up as it is. But I already went through the process of doing all this and started down that road, and they asked me to stop. So I respectfully did, even though they didn't put a stop work on my permit. My hardship would be that I would like to just put it back and be able to store my things. And my argument to that would be that, well, I mean, I have a home I just purchased around the same time in the Arbors of Rockwood. And that contractor has more than I have for lay down space and construction for his tools and materials. He has a job trailer. I don't have any of that. So if I'm building a house and I'm a GC it myself, I would need suitable area to do that, store my materials, my tools, and secure my site.
Just to be clear, who asked you to stop? Was it the county or was it
The county.
the city?
I'm sorry, the city. I apologize.
City of Wildwood.
Yeah, it's the city of Wildwood, not the county.
Okay.
Searching the hardship. mean, you could not store any material there. You wouldn't have to store any material there until it came time to build your house. I think at that point, you would have a better case for a variance than you do now.
So in the meantime, with all the material and everything I purchased, under the presumption I could build, that's there, the whole reason it's there. What am I doing in the meantime? I'm gonna go buy another separate property for another $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to do that?
You're in the construction business.
Right, I'd have to go somewhere with it. I'd have to take it somewhere, and I don't have that right now. And if I'm gonna have to go buy another property to store those things until I apply for a permit, which again, even if I apply for a permit to build a home or primary residence, I don't think this by the code is allowed to be built until that one's established first. So even if I'm doing construction at the same time, unless it falls under the same permit, is not gonna be allowed then. So it still doesn't help me.
Here, 2000. But.
I can't hear, Mr. Rubus.
Oh, my,
Have you had any conversation with your neighbors about what is it that you might get together with?
yes, I've done that. I've attempted to sit down and have peaceful, civil conversations about this multiple times. I don't understand the pushback. Again, I'm only here to add value. I think there's one address primarily driving that, and that's fine. I don't know what the aversion is. I'm just trying to develop a property like everybody else has in that area. I mean, they have houses on their property. Why am I not allowed to build on my property? It seems silly to me.
Well, I don't think that's the question. It's not whether you're allowed to build on your property. You can build a home on your property. But the ordinance says that you can't build an accessory building until you have a primary residence.
Yes, sir. I'm not building an accessory building. I'm repairing an existing building.
It's an accessory building. And it's not in compliance.
So if I had not gone down the path of applying for a permit to repair it and just used it as was, would it have been any different?
I don't think I can answer that question right now.
Well, I think what we have an understanding of is it was non-conforming, it was non-compliant from the get-go.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so, but we also understand how these buildings sort of come to be. Yours is a very interesting case because, well, number one, you were given permission.
Correct. And
to rebuild this, or I think technically to repair, but I don't know how you repair the photograph that I saw. I don't know how you would repair that.
I have a copy of the approved plan here too, that shows that we are rebuilding the whole entire thing, because the discussion that we had around it was that it's not repair. I mean, like I said, it looked like somebody had gathered materials from a job site and used those scraps to kind of put boards together to make something.
So to kind of boil this down, you requested a permit to rebuild this structure, and you were granted the permit to rebuild this structure. And in the process of actually acquiring material, et cetera, somehow, some way, the city became aware of that.
Somehow,
maybe, yeah. I suspect I would know how that happened, but then you were informed that you're going to need a variance for this.
Yes.
And so now here you are in front of this board seeking that variance to continue the project that you had an approved permit for.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yep, go ahead, Mr. Rose.
That's a question for. This is a question for Joe. Who actually issued the permit and who withdrew the permit?
The city of Wildwood authorized St. Louis County to issue a building permit for the repair of the outbuilding. The city of Wildwood ultimately placed the stop work order.
Has it got nothing to do with it? But I did a lot of reading about ingress and egress rights to go even on the property to do anything. And it seemed like the neighbors all think you don't have a right to be on the property. You have a right to be on it, but you don't have a right to use their private road to get there.
Correct. So I've also had that discussion as many times as I possibly can. I've called all of them to include there is a road subdivision association agreement out there. I've talked with all of them multiple times just to get voted on to the road association, allowing or even submitting to some special fine or levy to make up any kind of back pay that wasn't being taken care of for the property. And I have no idea why, but they just don't want that. I had talked about even improving the way that we cross into the property where everybody uses a low water pass, where everybody drives over the running creek water, and pooling funds. And I have financial backing to be able to install a bridge, which is no small feat. I mean, Army Corps of Engineers involved, the Department of Natural Resources. I mean, a whole bunch of people involved to get that done. And I've gone through all those channels, and I've done my homework and talked with hydrological engineers and gotten plans for how we could go about doing that. And I've discussed that with them. I've done nothing in secrecy, but there's still some sort of aversion. I'm not sure where it comes from. I don't approach anything in an abrasive manner, but I mean, since the day I purchased the property and I went to just walk the property with my wife, we've been met with screaming neighbors.
Well, you can't have a property that don't have access. That's why they do the flag lot. That's why you got the long skinny piece going up the Fox Creek Road.
Correct.
And it seems like they can't stop you from putting a road from Fox Creek back to your
Yes,
property.
they can. Absolutely, they can. There's no road frontage available to be able to force that.
Well, you got to go across the creek and then front.
No, that's not, there's no road frontage available. There's no road frontage available to have an approach to cross the creek for a bridge. The physical limitations in my study with the Cochrane Engineering and the hydraulics engineer, there is not space there because of the road and the erosion of the creek to be able to put a bridge abutment off of Fox Creek into the property. There is no physical access. There's no way you can force it.
So when you bought this property, what was your access? How were you supposed to get there?
So I've talked to several lawyers about this as well. So I've gone and talked with them about easement rights because when I was sold the property, the title insurance says I have access off of Fox Hollow Run. And I've gone back to title and told them, hey, listen, I purchased this property. I've driven on the Fox Hollow Run as anybody else would do. And the access was, as I was told, was from Fox Hollow Run because there is not a bridge established right now. And I thought, it would be cute for my wife and I to be able to build a bridge across the creek and, make it a covered little wooden bridge looking, even though it's structurally sound with everything else below it, to have a darling little entrance to the property, But after purchasing the property and looking into that, because I was informed by a screaming neighbor that there's no effing way the Army Corps of Engineers has ever let me do that. I went and started looking into it. And well, that's fine because my title work says I have access through Fox Hollow Run. And I've talked to several attorneys about this. And if we have to take it to court, which I'm not afraid to do, the access is going to be granted through that Fox Hollow Run anyway. I mean, everybody else in the subdivision uses that access. There's no reason why it would be excluded. And the verbiage in the existing road association agreement grants the future use of other properties. I don't know why mine would be excluded from that.
Did you buy this through Tom Shaw or we've got a letter in here from Kathy Shaw?
I don't know who Kathy
The
Shaw is.
realtor. She's the realtor of Tom Shaw. She's the daughter of Tom Shaw, realtor. And she's got a letter there saying you have no rights to get on the property.
I'm not sure who she is. I've never talked to
Okay,
Kathy Shaw?
I'm just saying that when you bought the property, somebody should have dealt straight with you.
I purchased it using the Wallner team, Jen and Rodney Wallner.
I don't know him.
I don't know who Kathy Shaw
Well,
is.
although this is important from
The
the
issue-
circumstantial stuff, but I
The
think we're
issue-
probably best to get back to the actual variance and kind of the hardship that we got. I mean,
So
it sounds like,
those two things.
sounds like
are
that's a whole nother
a
issue
civil
that,
matter, right?
Yeah,
That's
going to be a
neither
whole
here
other
nor
separate
there.
issue. Best of luck with that, but let's get back to the variance and kind of what hardship we feel or any other additional questions that you guys might have.
Well, I have a question actually for the city. And just help me understand. The petitioner was granted a permit to repair the facility or the building. But then the city said, no, you're going to need a variance because he's not repairing it now. He's doing something different. Help us understand kind of the change that the city went through to say, okay, this is now different than what we originally thought.
Before I answer your question, I just want to give you a little background about non-conforming uses, lands, and structures. In the zoning ordinance, there is a chapter that deals with these types of situations. And for the most part, what it describes is that non-conforming structures not be enlarged, expanded, or otherwise replaced. And for the most part, then means they have to be demolished or there's the end of life. They can stay, they're non-conforming, they're legal, but they can stay until such time that they are no longer usable or have come to the point of a condition where they need to be removed. From the perspective of the department, we're not perfect. Certainly, there are times we make mistakes. But in this particular instance, the repair would have, for the most part, not gone against those ordinances or those regulations relating to non-conforming uses, lands, and structures. It was a repair, an existing, non-conforming, legal, and it was to be repaired. What ultimately happened was a replacement. We're starting over, so to speak. The petitioner has advised that he intends to use, for the most part, the existing foundation of the original building, but for all intents and purposes, the original building's gone. And so from that perspective, the non-conforming uses, lands, and structures regulations does not provide the protection now because we're starting new.
So if it were really a repair, truly a repair, maybe the roof needs a little work or whatever, that would have been okay. But because it was all basically torn down and you got a concrete slab and that's what you're starting with, this is now a replacement and that isn't protected, is what I'm hearing you say.
Exactly. And
Got it.
the interpretation of the department, at least the director of the department is there is some latitude when there's repair.
Mhm.
And it,
Yeah.
that those particular regulations go into percentages in some instances, 50%, 60%. In certain instances in the floodplain, et cetera, if it's 50 or 60%, you can actually even do some major repairs.
Mhm.
But in this particular instance, the outbuilding is not in the floodplain. And obviously it was, for all intents and purposes, 100% replacement.
Right. So that's interesting. And like if it would have been a 50% repair, would have that been okay?
There probably would have been a longer discussion, and certainly we would have taken that into account, and we would have thoroughly reviewed the regulations regarding nonconformities, consulted the city attorney before making a decision. But I just want to emphasize, we're
Sure.
not perfect,
Yeah.
but the authorization sheet that was provided to you for tonight's hearing indicates a repair. And so we would based all of our decisions on a repair, not replacement.
Did the petitioner in any way indicate that he was going to like do a very major repair, like tear the whole thing down and start over? Or, I mean, I know that's water under the bridge, so to speak, but it's kind of a little bit important, I think.
Well, from at least my perspective, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I met Mr. Otzenberg, who was kind enough to invite me out to the property and allow me access. Prior to that, all of the conversations were held between, I believe, Steve Vogel, our planning technician, and Mr. Otzenberger. So I can't relay that secondhand. All I can tell you is that when the issue was identified, the first thing we looked at was the authorization the city prepared. The authorization the city prepared said a repair.
Sure.
Well, obviously, it went beyond that,
Yeah.
probably with all good intent,
Mhm.
but from the perspective of the ordinance, it needed to be addressed.
Right. Okay. I think I get it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Munich, it appears that I think that's a little more clear that this is definitely not a repair. My question is, what dictates or does not dictate a primary structure? What would this need to have, or what does not have that disqualifies it from being?
So in the non-urban resident district, there's two sets of uses, really three, but I'll get to the third. Two sets of uses. There's permitted by right. And then there's those that are under conditional use permit. The third is accessory. If Mr. Otzenberg and his wife were to establish a primary use, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a single family dwelling, but any of the permitted uses in the non-urban resident district, if they were established, legally established on the lot, that would constitute the primary use. The primary use, as you all know from your backgrounds here on the Board of Adjustment, being residents of Wildwood, in the non-urban resident district area, it's primarily single family dwelling. Occasionally, you'll have a farm. Farm has to be 5 acres in size and actually has to produce either some type of grain, stock, and be sold. It has to be a farm. The fact that you have 5 acres and you got grass on it doesn't make it a farm. There's actually a component that's associated with it. The other primary uses in the non-urban area are typically public spaces or schools, churches, things like that. So we've focused on the single family dwelling because, as Mr. Otzenberg said in his testimony, that's his intent to build eventually there with that. And so from that perspective, that's why we talk about it, not necessarily some of the others, but quite frankly, given the terrain, the conditions of the property, can't do much other than a single family dwelling on it, just because of either its size limitations, its topography, floodplain access, et cetera.
Thank you, Director English. Any additional comments, Mr. Otzenberger?
Yes, sir. I do appreciate what Joe has just shared with us. However, the approved permits that I have from the county show pretty clearly we're framing the entire building. This is the approved set of plans. They knew exactly what I was doing. They approved it that way. The highlighted point of contention to me on my voicemail that they left was that I don't have a primary residence established before building this building. It had nothing to do with how much repair was done to the building or what was going to be done to the building. It wasn't until Frank came out to do his initial site survey that he said, there's nothing here worth saving. And I said, I agree. He said, I would take the whole thing down and start over, just like we're doing. So there was no provision in there about percentage of repair or any of that discussion at all. It was the intent the entire time and approved as such in my plans, both by St. Louis County and by the city of Wildwood, to rebuild on the exact same platform.
Any additional comments?
Yes, sir.
I
You
can't
seem
hear
like
you.
I'm sorry.
I can't hear anything. I didn't hear who said that. Was it Mr. Van Est?
Mr. Van Ness said it.
I didn't hear anything he said.
I said we do have a set of his plans in our packet. So what he's been talking about, we can see in front of us.
Perfect.
Mr. Otzenberger, have you looked to kind of along the same lines that I was asking Director Vunic, have you looked at what would necessitate this to be a single family dwelling?
I
on
have.
That existing pad?
And it's essentially the same thing. I have to have, because there's water there's power there. The other requirement would be sanitary sewer. I can come in, drop and we've talked about this, expanding the footprint, making it a little bit bigger, make it more of a usable space, and just going ahead and drilling the sanitary right there. And of course, wherever I can get approved to do so, because I've got a creek adjacent to, and I've got other neighbors that have wells that are adjacent to. So there are restrictions there. But I could drop one near this location, tie into that system, and I would meet all the requirements of a single family dwelling to meet these needs and requirements. That's not the intent, because to drill or to dig up a sanitary system is going to cost roughly on the order of $15,000-$20,000, if not more, given the terrain. And I'd like to use that same system to tie in my primary structure. So if that was the case, I would have no problem moving the structure uphill, drilling, but then I'm away from my water and my power. The limitations of the MEPs kind of dictate it stays where it is. And I mean, if I needed to, I guess I could come in and put a small septic system in place, get approval for that where it needs to go, and I could build whatever I want then right there, and it wouldn't matter. I guess I could go down that road if that was what, if needed to happen. But it wasn't the intent again initially to do that. I was just trying to rebuild the existing structure. I'm not trying to backdoor anybody and try and find loopholes. That's never been my intent. It was never been my intent from the whole entire start of this project. My wife and I just wanted a, nice little piece of land. We can kind of tuck a nice house back and relax with our family. But it's been quite more of a challenge and uphill battle than anticipated.
Any additional comments from the board?
So looking at the plans, it's pretty clear this is not a repair. It's pretty clear. I mean, it seems pretty clear that it's not a repair. So, and the city approved the plans. I mean, I think there's a sense that we have to be fair in this whole thing, because you were just functioning as an owner of property to rebuild this structure. You got the permit. This feels an awful lot like this plan probably should have never been approved in the first place.
I agree. Once we've gone down that road and kind of talked further with the city, then you say, okay, well, then this should never have been approved.
Yeah.
And I would have at that point said, okay, and readdressed it a different way.
But you're now invested to some degree.
Minorly, right? So I've got a couple $1,000s in rock down to try and establish an area. I've got a couple $1,000s in materials. I've got, a significant amount of my time at this point trying to establish this or get this taken care of. I've been fighting this for the past 2 years. The driving force here is I was issued 2 citations for having my things on my property. And that was called on by one of the neighbors as having things that don't belong on the property. Well, that's understandable. So I started to resolve that as best as possible. But in order to do that, I needed to get this taken care of. Is this again, I can take my building materials and my tools and find somewhere else to go with them. I mean, I sold a different piece of property in Jefferson County and then moved to this piece of property here in Wildwood. It's closer to my house now. I mean, I live in, like I said, the Arbors of Rockwood. It's not 5 miles away. It's less than a mile as the bird flies from my property. It's pretty convenient to have. Which was the nice part. I could get back and forth between the 2 properties with little effort. But it's not been that easy, actually.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Any speakers in the audience that may want to speak in favor or opposition to the request?
Again, Mr. Chair, the department has not received any speaker cards for this item, and there are a few online, but none have raised their hand. Thank you.
Mr. Newbear, there's a Member in the audience. We don't have any speaker cards.
I don't have any speaker cards, but if they'd like to fill one out, I'd be happy to call their name.
We had
Ma'am, would you go
speaker
ahead?
cards in the back table. If you could please quickly fill that out and we'll get that to Mr. Newberry. Okay. Good point. Ma'am, you can go ahead and come up. We'll go ahead and get you sworn in, and then you can always fill that card out after and hand that to Mr. Newberry.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you could, please state your name, address, relation to this, to the property of the petition, and we'll get you sworn in by the court reporter.
My name is Janine Bermel, and I am the owner, along with my husband Dennis New, of 19025 Fox Run Hollow Lane, which is a little less than 13 acres that sit to the immediate north of 4437 Fox Creek Road.
Get you sworn in here.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the board, I am an attorney. When we appear before the court, we don't fill out a speaker card. So I'm sorry if I missed that when I walked in the door. I wanted to clarify a few matters, but first of all, I would like to say that there are a number of residents, property owners along Fox Run Hollow Lane. Some of them have Fox Creek Road addresses. It's kind of strange out there, that submitted oppositions. This was not of my doing. This was their decision, not mine. We appreciate it that you will take these into consideration and make whatever
Absolutely.
determination. Along with that, there are a couple matters for clarification. First of all, I'd like to point out that the prior existing facility that we were talking about was not a facility. It was a one-room country shack used by an old couple. And it had been there. Mr. Flagg is here. He lives in he owns the property to the immediate south. His family moved into that property in 1962. That shack was there at that time. It had a screened-in porch with a well on the porch. It had a power line. That's all it had. I don't even believe it had a septic system. It had a cook stove. And they took that, they used that shack for the weekends for their family. So this facility that he's now proposing is an entirely different use. And it was that facility, that pad, that initial pad was 9 by 24. So what he is proposing is actually larger. And the steel that was laid out and the concrete that was poured actually extends beyond the original pad. Maybe some of that original pad was gone because that's how old the structure is. But we're talking about something that went back prior to 1960. And that's not uncommon for an old country shack like that to be in the woods somewhere. I mean, after all, we are now Wildwood, but at one point it was the Wild West, but not anymore. And that's another reason why we're here, because this is not the Wild West. There was talk about the fact he doesn't understand, Mr. Otzenberger doesn't understand why the residents and the participants of a maintenance agreement are not appreciative of the woods being used as storage. When I leave my driveway, the first thing I see is probably a 10-foot high blue tarp, a white enclosed trailer, 2 trucks, trusses. And let me say, these trusses were not brought in after he filed for the permit. They were brought in 3 months before. So amassing construction equipment to build the storage facility and clearing started before even filing for the permit. So when talking about hardship, I have money invested. Yes, but that was before the permit was even issued. So that was one point that I wanted to make. But along with that, Mr. Otzenberger has continuously said that what he has invested is no big deal. It's not a lot of money. I'm with Mr. Harris. I don't see the hardship here. What we have is hardship as neighbors. Mr. Gout has to look out his kitchen window and he sees just a junkyard. That's what it looks like from his back window, even when there's foliage, because there's an opening into the back area. I can see it from the north, and I know other people can see it from where they are. So there's no reason why we need this eyesore in the middle of a residential district. And I think it's correct There are no other subdivisions that have to build a 12 by 27 building to house building before they build a house. And I would like to point out as well that the white trailer, Mr. Otzenberger comes and goes and removes construction equipment from that white trailer. He's using that property for his present business, which is home remodeling. It's not to store construction materials for building a house. It's for his business. And he also acknowledged that he's been bringing in materials for other things, from consolidating houses for his friends. He had an RV parked in the driveway for, what was that, Orlando? Over a week with Texas plates. So how are we going to have any assurances, if he's allowed to use this, that he's not going to continue to amass these materials and have friends store boats and trailers and so forth? We have no assurance. Do we have to call Joe every week to come out and check? I don't want my tax dollars used like that. I don't think city planning has those resources. They're shorthanded already. That's all I have to say. If you have any questions for me.
I do. A lot of what you've described are things that would be considered unsightly, eyesores, whatever. If the building were there and the material was stored inside and there wasn't stuff scattered here and there, would that be an issue then?
Yes, sir, I do think it would be an issue. First of all,
Because
I don't believe that all those materials are going to fit in a 12 by 27 building if you see how much is located there. Second of all, what assurances do we have that materials won't be stored about the property? What I heard from Mr. Otzenberger today, the primary argument was, this is my property. I should be allowed to do whatever I want to do. As I said, this is Wildwood, not the Wild West. We have codes.
okay, but I'm still not quite sure if I understand the heart of the concern. If the heart of the concern is junk laying around, I get that. No one wants to look at the neighbor's junk. Trust me, I really get that. But if that weren't the case, if things were really in the building, then would there be an objection from the neighbors?
There would be an objection, in part because there's no easement to that property as well. I didn't want to get into the easement issue this evening because the city has been very clear and we've respected that. It's not an issue for the city. It's a civil issue.
Correct. Yeah, that seems like a separate issue.
Exactly.
That's a separate issue. I can play the what if game it some more. If the easement or somehow the access were granted, somehow it was done. I'm trying to understand really what the concern of the neighbors are. Because if he builds a building, if he builds a house, you're probably going to see that. And then after he's got a house built, he can put that accessory building up and you'll see that. So I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around what the real deep concern is. And if the real deep concern is more the unsightliness, I get that. You know, that somehow would have to be addressed. But ultimately, buildings are gonna probably be there.
Well, and you are correct. We could play the what if game a long time.
Yeah.
But Mr. Otzenberger, in one of those meetings he had with us, was asked directly, when do you plan to build a house? To which he responded, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have no guarantees. The city
Sure.
has no guarantees, nor could that be enforced. Once the storage building goes up, we're stuck with it. Just like when he asked us permission as good neighbors to allow him just one-time temporary access to bring trusses across our property. Before we knew it, the woods were full of junk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, just a moment. We have additional speakers. Yep, do you have a card? Absolutely. We'll hand it to Mr. Newberry there. If you could, sir, please state your name, address, relationship to this property, and then we'll get you sworn in by the court reporter.
My name is Orlando Gaunt, Gaut, of 4433 Fox Creek Road, which is the property in front of Matt's towards Fox Creek Road.
Okay, Mr. Gott, we'll get you sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Gott.
I met Matt and his wife when they were clearing off one side of Fox Creek Road, on the Fox Creek side, and introduced myself. He said, I've been looking to meet you. We bought the property. We're going to build a bridge across here. And I explained to Matt that for years I had tried to approach building a bridge, but the Corps of Engineers, Department of Natural Resources, everybody else said you can't do it. So I explained that to him. He says, well, I'm an engineer. I got friends. I can do this. I can do that. So now this is somewhat to the access. I've built, as shown in the picture, a small bridge across the side creek to our property. No, I take it back, with Dennis and Janine understanding that we had access to use the Fox Creek Road crossing on Howell Lane. Matt asked me, could he bring some equipment in to clear it off in the back across the bridge? I said, yes, you can. I knew that he was talking to Dennis and Janine about gaining access to go further up the road and build a creek bridge crossing. I explained to Matt that he had till the end of last year to settle whatever they wanted to do with that. But that's my private driveway coming across the front of my front yard. And I didn't want a lot of construction and materials and everything else. Well, Matt has continued to use that. I told him he had till the end of the year, 2022. He has not approached me at all about continuing that. I do not appreciate him continuing doing that. And as far as what's back there, trucks get changed in and out, vehicles get changed in and out. We see that quite often. He is not only on my property, but then he goes to my neighbor's property to go up and around. Yes, there is a piece of property down between to go across. Before, the county / Wildwood allowed, and I'm not saying this was intentional, the frontage of the creek to deteriorate. Ray and I crossed through just a regular low water crossing. I agree that it cannot be put, a bridge cannot be put across there. But I do not appreciate the continuous use of my property to gain access to his property. I understand that that's contingent upon what a judge would say. But what he had told me in the very beginning, that he was going to work out access with Dennis and Janine, and there has been numerous argumentative discussion about this. And Matt has not been, with me, totally sincere about what he wants to do. I have concerns about what's back there. As Janine pointed out, I look out my window, I see trucks, I see trailers, I see lawnmowers and everything else that's been out just stuck back there. In the wintertime, all the foliage goes off and I see it all. I don't believe that I've lived there for almost 40 years. I've been back there when that was just a piece of falling down building. The slab that is back there, from my memory, was all busted up, probably this thick of concrete. I don't believe it had a footing. The well that Matt talks about hasn't been used in 38 years. I can guarantee you that much. That's how long I've been out there. And the electrical drop that he has out there, I don't believe is active and hasn't been active for years and years and years. So I am not in favor of granting his, because I don't believe it's going to be cleaned up. He has not given me any indication at all that he would do that, and more stuff keeps showing up. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gott. Any additional speakers in the audience that would like to speak in favor or opposition to this session? Yep. Mr. Ossenberger, if you'd like to come back up, we'll hear some.
I have no intentions of making this an argument. I just want to point out some fallacies and things that have been said. In the approved permit, you'll see the plot and the plat of my property. And on my property is the gravel road that runs up that flagpole that serves Orlando and Ray's home. So I cross over, what is this dimension here? 105 feet of surface area in Orlando's front yard, as he put it, to access my road, which then I take all the way back to my property. The same road that Ray and Orlando for 40 years have been using, correct? 40 years to serve. So they're driving up my property to get to their access of their houses. And I have zero issue whatsoever with this. It's silly. These guys have been doing this for a long time. Why would I have issue? And if that road has been there, that means it's crossed over that little creek that he's talked about, he established with this bridge, and the agreement he has with Janine and Dennis, which they've only lived there for about 13 years. So if he's had this access here for 50 or 40 years, whatever you just said, how is there an agreement between them for the past 12 about a bridge that was already established there? This is not the place to even have this discussion. Who's on whose property? We're all on each other's property. And I have no problem, again, being a good neighbor. We are all helping each other out here. At least that was the preface that I came with.
I agree with all that. And I'm going to have to say, we're going to have to set all that aside because
I agree,
that's
100%.
well beyond this committee. I would ask if you could, because I think this gets to the premise of what it is. It sounds like their belief is that in 6 months, you're going to have a storage shed, let's call it, and you're still going to have all this stuff outside. So now they have two eyesores, they believe in that. So I guess what we're wrangling with is the stuff's going to sit out there, assuming outside of those citations, that stuff is legal to be there. Is that correct? Crosses, things of that nature. That stuff is
part of the permit. So the stuff, if you go back to her slideshow presentation, shows the only material that's there now. And then the only material has been there for probably about a year, maybe less. And once you build the building, the materials are the building and they go away. And then the materials that are sitting out, tools would go inside the building. So it resolved itself.
Are you under the assumption that right now, you said you received some citations? Are you in compliance with whatever's in that yard can be there for 5 years, 10? Are you legal or are you complying?
When Joe came out to the property and invited and met with me after approximately 2 years of this ongoing saga, he said himself, this is not atypical of any other construction site. He says, in fact, it's very well organized. I can't see why they're raising an issue. That was his words when he came out. He said, and to his own, again, accord, once we build the building, those materials go away. I mean, it's not like the materials stay there when you build the building. The building is the material sitting out, staged, trusses, sheeting material, windows, doors, overhead doors. I mean, those are all sitting on the property. Once you put the building together, they're no longer sitting around. And they're not a junkyard. I mean, yes, it did look like a heap when my cousin brought some things over from his property. We have since gotten rid of those. The pictures that she presented are the most recent pictures that are out there. And it looks like a half construction site.
I guess what I'm struggling with here is, and I may be jumping to conclusions, but my assumption is the reason that this ordinance is in place is because living on the property, having a home there makes you invested in that area.
Mm-hmm.
You see it every day. You wake up, you look out your windows, you see your own junk.
Mm-hmm.
If this is a property where you're kind of using it as a staging ground for anything else you're doing, you don't have a lot of invested interest. I think you even said you have minimal investment. And so my assumption is that if you don't have that home there, you don't have to look at that stuff. You go to your home and your other home and you don't have to see all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, as we can understand, your neighbors are seeing that every day. So I guess what I'm struggling with is my biggest fear is that you're going to have a storage unit and you're still going to storage unit shed. The building you're speaking of is going to be there and you're still going to have all your stuff scattered throughout the yard. So now and just as one of your neighbors said, now the enforcement mechanism of this is completely gone. There's nothing, assuming you're in compliance with what can be there with other codes.
We
There's
can go off
nothing
of what ifs,
yeah.
but that's not the intent. That's never been my intent.
Correct.
However, we can go off absolute facts. And if
Mhm.
you get a simple Google search would show the amount of things that are laying around in the adjacent properties. And I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody,
Sure.
but when I came through with my intent to get access to my property, Orlando's things were on my property. He built a second building to kind of put some of his things under cover. And the reason I can't drive directly into my property would be because Orlando has things still staged on my flagpole that goes back to my property. There's trailers, there's vehicles, there's tents, there's building materials, there's the same exact things they're crying about for me
Yeah.
are sitting in their property. And you have to pass those things to get to my property. So I can't believe that they would even bring up that I have things that are being staged that are an eyesore, when if you look at the surrounding properties, I mean,
I think the
There
difference,
are-
Mr. Otzenberger, is that you're asking for an exception. So for us to understand this exception, we're looking for good faith.
Absolutely. And that's my whole-
To
my
say that,
approach
hey,
this
that
entire
this
time
is,
has been
this building will be used as you're
Absolutely.
saying.
it'll be used in that intent, and I will build a building there. And once I have a house there, I mean, I drive past Janine's house to get to my house, and I see her house. So if I build a house there, why would I expect you not to see my home, especially if I'm building a 4,000 plus square foot house? And once I have that established, I can build a 100 by 100 shop there if I wanted to, and there'd be nothing she could say about it. It's my property. I can use it how I intend to. I'm trying to do it the legal way and go through the processes. But I mean, whether she considers an eyesore or not, I mean, her property was a degenerate property up until just recently. She put a fence back up that had been dilapidated since I purchased the property. So I mean, the fact that they're calling out that this is an eyesore is ridiculous at the best. I mean, it turned a mirror. There were 3 rooftop
Well,
AC units
if you
sitting
don't-
in Ray's front yard for 2 years. His excavator sits out in his front yard. But because it's a home, it's fine. It can stay there.
I understand your frustration and, you know, I'm sympathetic to that. I will say that let's stick with kind of your property and the hardship that's
Right.
going to, if you don't mind, please, because
No, I
otherwise
agree.
it does sound like there's a lot to sort out. But again, from my viewpoint is what I'm struggling with is this building going to be used as is intended to? And is this going to solve one problem, or are we going to create another?
No,
And that's
it
kind of what this
absolutely-
board has to weigh.
My intent, absolutely, the whole intent of applying for permits and going through these processes was never to trick anybody or backdoor anybody. Like I said before, it was never to do that. I want to come with good faith. I do this as a living. I'm not a contractor. I'm an engineer. In fact, I have a couple of contracting businesses that are still open that I don't even do any work under. So, I mean, when she talks about me coming back and forth, it's to grab a tiller out of my trailer that would be sitting in a building if I could have built the building.
Correct.
To make a garden at my home. I mean, it's not like I'm bringing trash and dumping trash. I've cleaned that property up. There were toilets out there. There were 55-gallon drums and old washers and old refrigerators. I cleaned all that stuff up out of the property. I have pre-existing pictures of the property. I've cleaned that stuff up. It was such an issue before I purchased the property. They never said a word about it before until I got out there and started cleaning it up, and I wanted to do something different. Her heartburn is that she tries to make me pay her $30,000 to drive on 100 foot of road.
And again, let's set that aside. I think.
I agree. I agree.
Again,
That's
I
the
can
crux
tell you
of
the
the matter.
passion, and it sounds like that's going to be
That's
quite the issue.
the matter.
We've got enough on our plate within this petition. Any additional comments, questions, anything else you'd like to present for?
No, sir. I mean,
Regardless of all these side issues, we're voting on whether he should build a building without a house.
Right.
The rules are the house comes first, then the building. Eyesore and all that is all side issues.
Correct.
But we're concerned with building a building before the house.
That is correct.
And my question is, if there's no house, why do we need the building?
Yeah, I think Mr. Otzenberger addressed
Well,
that. Is there anything
we'll
else you'd
say
like
that-
to add on that particular
for
question?
that would be just so I can safely store my materials and my equipment so that I can build the house. I mean, sitting out in the middle of the woods when I'm trying to build a house, I have nowhere to put my tools, nowhere to put, unless I can drag a Connex in the middle of the woods, which I don't think is favorable. to store materials and tools. I don't know where else you store this stuff.
Are you planning to build your own house?
Well, I absolutely plan on, did you see my project? Yes.
You're planning to be the general contractor?
Yes, I'm not building it myself. No, I have.
Okay, but I think I understand what it means when you do your own GC work. I mean, you're gonna have a lot of it done, but you'll probably be doing things as well.
Sure, of course,
You
something on the
can.
property. Yes.
Okay, that's what your mindset is. That's why you want the building to store them.
And the only reason there was an open-ended comment about when do you plan on building was I don't know when I can build because I haven't gone through the process to get the permits for the building because I don't know from them why I can't access my property the same way everybody else does, especially when I'm submitting to any special conditions to get on this road association, which is their problem.
Director of Units, what are the options from a temporary structure standpoint? Like a cargo container. I imagine we've addressed that or seen that in the past.
From the ordinance's perspective, we actually make two pretty major accommodations for temporary structures and none other. And both of those are construction related. First is a display trailer in association with a new subdivision, and the other is containers, the typical things you see on most construction sites for the storage of materials, equipment, et cetera. So there are already provisions that allow that without any exception.
So that sounds like that temporary structure provision that's already available to you would accomplish the very thing that you're seeking.
Sure. That's that. And of course, we only learned that after got the approved permits, which is the problem. If I had known that, I'd have gone down that road first, but I went through this channel and asked for review, if this was the proper process in doing so. And I was blessed with a permit and the ability to do so. So if it comes down to I can't, I'm gonna have to ask for refunds on the things that I've already invested in this property based on a permit application and approval from the city.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, that's the complicating factor here.
Right. And that is the hardship I see.
You would get a no vote probably. I don't know how everybody else would go, but my suspicion is you'd get a no vote if this were from the get-go. Yeah.
Understandably, and I would go down a different
But your
path.
issue is, wait a minute, I was given a permit to do this.
I did pull
And now
two
it's
separate
been
permits.
pulled. Now it's
Yes.
been pulled from me. I gave
It's
you,
not even been pulled.
I
To
gave
be fair,
plans.
they've never once issued a stop work order ever. They just left a voicemail on my phone that said, hey, just we'll work with you. We weren't pulled the permit verbatim. And it says, just please stop construction for now. We'll get a resolution. And that's been almost 2 years. So I did in good faith, I didn't carry forward all of my construction, but he said, hey, if you don't have a stop work permit, build the thing. But I'm not doing that either. I'm not trying to be a thorn in people's side. I'm trying to do this in good faith.
Any additional comments? Thank you, Mr. Ossenberger.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, go ahead. Just a moment, Mr. Gott. We'll wait till you get to the microphone, please.
The drawing that Matt just showed you is wrong. It's incomplete. The UE easement that he shows on there has been gone since before I was there. And the road that he talks about that Ray and I use is actually on Ray's property. It's not on his property. We've been using it on Ray's property. It's been there since the 50s. And I have been utilizing his piece of property and cutting the grass over there. Currently, there is nothing that's of mine that is blocking him from going up his piece of property. I like to make that clear.
Understood.
Again, there's misconceptions here.
Mr. Gott, can I ask you a question?
You betcha.
It sounds like there's, let's call it a cargo container, could be a resolution that unfortunately does not need a variance, which
I'm
means.
surprised how he thinks he's gonna
It-
get a
and
cargo
again, we're-
container back there.
Understood, but all things aside, you now as a neighbor, you have the possibility of looking at that or looking at a, what I would consider a more permanent structure. And I guess, go ahead, Director. Yeah,
That temporary structure is only authorized in conjunction with the permit for the home.
okay.
So
So it isn't, okay,
you don't need a display trailer if you don't have a subdivision. You don't need a temporary construction trailer if you don't have a permit for the primary use.
got it. Then, yeah. No, sir. Now I understand. That makes a difference. Okay. Any additional speakers in the audience? And if you could we pertain to the structure? I don't want to get into the easements and the roads and all that, if you don't
I
mind.
understand.
Please. Yeah, thank you.
Two things I want to clarify.
Mhm.
My husband and I have been proud residents of Wildwood at that address for 25 years, not 12. The bridge was still being financed at the time that we moved in, just newly built. So that in fact was misinformation that Mr. Otzenberger provided. The other thing is, I apologize for my dilapidated fence. We had a contract to construct something, a fence, a $45,000 fence. And then something happened. It was called COVID. And suddenly my $40,000 fence was a $120,000 fence. So it took a little bit longer than we expected, but we have a beautiful fence and our property is beautiful. We want to keep it that way. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. At this time, anybody like an opportunity to hear an oral presentation of the department's report? Director Bunich, any final comments?
Mr. Chair, with your permission, just a few. First and foremost, not to belabor the point, but hindsight is always 20/20. So from that perspective, I'm sure if Mr. Vogel, our planning technician, would have saw a photograph of the condition of the existing structure, that maybe he would have investigated a little bit more the context of the plans associated with the authorization, not knowing if it was in good shape, bad shape, or somewhere in between. The basis of his decision was a repair. And that, for the most part, obviously was an erroneous decision on the part of the department. And we acknowledge that there was an error made from that perspective. I would also say to you that you are not the Board of Equity. You are the Board of Adjustment. Things are unfair relative to the application of regulations. People complain all the time that, why do I have to adhere to this? It's my property. You're not the Board of Equity. I say that respectfully. You're the Board of Adjustment. And in this particular instance, we're looking for a hardship. And there is no hardship. The hardship is the fact that there was an error in the issuance of a permit, but I would argue it wasn't an error because, again, we saw repair, not replacement. And that would have triggered a whole different process. And we could have certainly helped Mr. Otzenberg address that. The department does not support this particular request. There's a process associated with it. And at the top of that process is we preserve our residential areas primarily for single-family dwellings. And that is at the top of the pyramid. And if there is activity that's going to, for the most part, impact our top of the pyramid, those single-family dwellings on large lots, then we do everything we can to protect them. And tonight, that is why we're recommending that the variance not be granted, despite all the circumstances that we've talked about tonight. The department's available for any comments or questions regarding this recommendation report. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Director Bunich.
Thank you.
Any final comments from the board?
I do have a question for Joe. Mr. Bunich, I know that maybe and it's, Monday morning quarterback is not all that helpful, but to me, even without a photograph, if you look at the plans, it's a rebuild is what's going on there. And, it was a mess, that's all. Is there anything that that the city or does to help a petitioner when something like this happens? Or is it just kind of too bad?
Well, fortunately, I can tell you that it doesn't happen very often. And in fact,
And by the way, I'm going to interject. You guys do an amazingly great job.
well,
Considering all the stuff that you have to see, you do an amazing job.
well,
But you're not 100%. You're 99 point something.
well, and again, I appreciate that, but that doesn't provide much consolation to Mr. Otzenberger or the neighbors. Our job is to be 100%. And again, I reluctantly admit, I don't think it was an error. Again, I didn't see the set of plans. I can't speak for Mr. Vogel, but when I look at the authorization and it says repair, that's all I can go upon, is that there were conversations. If he didn't recognize the plan's extent, again, that's an interpretation skill, and sometimes those aren't always 100%. But do we do things for applicants? Certainly, if the board were to deny the variance, in a future application, certainly we would do our very best to make sure it's done correctly and that there is no expenditure of funds until we're guaranteeing Mr. Otzenberger that the permit has been double checked and everything is appropriate. We won't compensate somebody unless the court tells us to compensate them, and then Mr. Young will be involved in that. Mr. Young has a great deal more experience with other municipalities and the law, obviously, and if he'd like to opine, I'd certainly be glad to hear. If there is a step that we can do to make the situation better, I'd be more than happy to try.
In terms of the discussion regarding the permit, it is worth noting, and as many of you who've been on this for a couple of years are well aware, an applicant for a permit is presumed to know what the law is as a matter of law. So if a permit is errantly issued, it is not a validly issued permit. So to say that I had a permit that I relied upon, there's two issues with that. One is it's been testimony that it shouldn't have been issued by both the city and the applicant. So acknowledging that it shouldn't have been issued, which means you're presumed to know and they're agreeing that, yeah, we shouldn't have requested that permit. So to say that it was issued and there should be some detrimental reliance on that is not legally supported. Second, as Mr. Vunich said, as the job of the Board of Adjustment is to review hardship based upon the unique nature of the property. Whether a permit was issued for something or not really doesn't factor into the overall analysis.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Thank you, Director Vunich. Any final comments from the board at this point?
Yeah, I mean, now we're kind of talking amongst ourselves here a little bit, but I think to be compliant with the city's ordinances and so forth, I would advocate that we're going to say no. But I also don't think it's fair to the applicant. I don't think he did anything wrong. I think he tried to do everything right. It sure appeared that way. When I looked at the plans, it sure looked to me like it was a rebuild, not a repair. So I just don't think it's fair, but yet that's not our job. Our attorney tells us that. So if I get off of that little soapbox for a moment, then I think to be in alignment with the city, that's kind of how I feel about it.
Any other final comments? At this time, we will close the proceeding for a vote. Do I have a motion to approve, a motion to deny, or a motion to approve with conditions?
Okay, I'll make a motion to deny.
Do I have a second on that motion to deny? Second from Mr. Rubus. Do a vote. Mr. Rubus, how do you vote? Mr. Sprung? Mr. Sprunger?
Regretfully deny.
Mr. Van Ness?
Deny.
Mr. Morris?
Deny.
And I vote to deny as well. The petition is denied. Mr. Director Venus, do we have the next petition?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, the last item on tonight's agenda is BA 10-23, Mike Crusoe, 16553 Willow Glen Drive, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040, care of Sean Quinn, 16966 Manchester Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. Request an exception to business signs attached to wall and also the supplementary regulations for the purpose of erecting 2 business signs attached to walls of the building located upon the property at 16962 Manchester Road, locator number 24V 510504, Grove Subdivision, Lot 1, Wildwood Town Center, which would thereby authorize a sign height of 28 inches in lieu of the required 24 inches on the north elevation, front of the building, and on the south elevation, rear of the same building, and internally lit LED letters in lieu of shielded externally lit sign, also having a height of 33 inches in lieu of the 24 inches. These sign requirements are stipulated by Chapter 415.420 sign regulations for all C&M districts of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, Chapter 415.190 C8 Plan Commercial District regulations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, and amended C8 Plan Commercial District ordinance number 2754. This request is also to be reviewed. It has been reviewed by the Architectural Review Board at its May 11, 2023 meeting, as required by Chapter 415.400 sign regulations general. This particular property is located in Ward 8, and as in the past 2 cases, the department would respectfully request that the following items be entered into the record. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance. The file that has been developed and maintained by the department regarding this particular request and all contents contained therein, including the department's report with recommendation. And then finally, any evidence or testimony that is offered tonight as part of this hearing. Thank you. And Ms. Keefe has a presentation for you.
Thank you, Director Nuge. Ms. Keefe?
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, our last case this evening involves a property located in our historic Grover area of Wildwood Town Center. It is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Rockwood Point Drive and Manchester Road. And it's located within a commercial plaza that has 2 other buildings within it. One hosting the Wildwood Athletic Center and the other hosting Midwest Gas Equipment. The building in question is currently occupied by a specialty bakery, and it is soon to be occupied by a physical therapy office. It is 8,500 square feet in area within it. This building does have a historical significance to Wildwood. The original portion of it was built in the 1850s. It was the location of a popular spot called Funk's Grove, which was a picnic and parade area attached to a general store, of which this building served that function for the community. And it was also the building hosting our former and first city hall for the city of Wildwood from 1995 through 2009. The physical therapy office is to go into the more recent addition to the building built in the 1980s. The subject property is zoned C8 Planned Commercial District.
This has been a commercial area of the city for quite some time. However, it should be noted, and the reason I have a zoning map up before you this evening is that there's quite a bit of residential areas surrounding this commercial area that fronts Manchester Road here. And so everywhere in yellow is really a residential zoning district, including this darker portion here. The petitioner is requesting this evening to install a front building wall sign and a rear building wall sign. And the petitioner has a few variance requests associated with this project. And I should note that the front building wall sign looks out onto Manchester Road, while the rear building wall sign fronts the back parking lot area. I'm going to split these up into the front wall sign variance first. As noted in the agenda language, this request was reviewed by the Architectural Review Board last Thursday on May 11th. This request, the first request, is to have a building sign that is 28 inches high lettering in lieu of the 24 inches mandated by city code. The department would note that a very similar variance was granted. In fact, it was a more substantial variance in 2012 for this same location for the business that was located within the addition at that time. The Architectural Review Board, in its assessment of the request regarding this front signage, initially suggested that it might be better suited to be located over these 3 windows here on a different portion of the building. However, one member did oppose that suggestion, stating that there's an existing lighting feature here. It's above the entrance to the office, and that potentially, with it being towards the corner of the building, the sign wouldn't be seen by drivers as they're coming down Manchester Road quite as well. So I'll just leave that with you. There was no firm one way or another. To give you a sense of the rest of the building and the other business occupying it, here is the other portion of the building occupied by Fantastic Cakes, and where to find them and the signage associated with it. And this is a picture across the street of our historic Grover Community District and some of the businesses located there. This is a picture of the intersection at Manchester Road and Rockwood Point Drive, or Etherton if you're going north. And then you can see the building in question over here to the left of the photo, and then the stop sign where cars are stopped over here. So I'll leave that first request now and move on to the second request this evening. The rear sign has 2 requests associated with it. One is that it have 33-inch high lettering in lieu of 24 inches, and 2, that it be an internally lit sign in lieu of a shielded externally lit sign as mandated by city code. The Architectural Review Board as a whole did not support either of these requests. Here to give you the surrounding context, here's a picture looking into that commercial plaza area and that back parking lot area. The sign would be located on the rear of the building here. And I'm standing right at that stop sign at the intersection. And I am looking southeast. Oh, sorry. There's another thing I meant to mention in this photo. There is an existing sign advertising all 3 or all the businesses within that commercial plaza in the public right of way in this location as well. Here we're looking south into the residential area. This is Rockwood Point Drive. And now we're turning into the commercial plaza area. And this is looking directly east, and here is the rear of the original portion of the building, and then the portion in question is out of sight. And then finally, I have a photo of that rear sign location. And here you can see it in relation to the traffic out on Manchester Road. And as you can see, that traffic is not going to see that sign. And so that concludes my presentation. As noted, there are two related variances to signage associated with this building in the past that was included in your report. The department has received no public comments on this item. Thank you. And of course, we're available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Keefe. At this time, will the petitioner please come forward, state his or her name, address, relation to the property, and then we'll get you sworn in by the court reporter.
Hi, Chris out of Dale Sign Service, address 13652 Manchester Road. I am representing SSM Health Physical Therapy under signage. Mr. Sean Quinn asked me to attend tonight.
Get you sworn in here.
Yep.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I believe,
I'm sorry, if you could explain the nature of the request and hardship. Sorry, I didn't give you
Yeah.
instructions.
I'm sorry. I wasn't at the last meeting. Mr. Quinn was, Sean Quinn with SSM. And my understanding is, as she spoke about, that the front sign, they were not having a big issue with it. The rear sign, they rejected the lighted channel letters on the rear building. Also understood that drawings were submitted after that earlier this week or possibly late last week about eliminating the illuminated lighted letters on the back and doing the same 1/2-inch thick cutout non-illuminated letters for the rear. And I hope you got those drawings. My understanding you did. Is that the case? No?
I have not received those drawings.
Okay, I apologize. So the rear building, Mr. Quinn decided not to chase the lighted letters, just to put flat cutout, non-illuminated letters on the rear of the building. I apologize. It was my understanding that it happened. Would you like to show them these, or this is the drawings that I sent Mr. Quinn that he was supposed to be here tonight? He had
So
a child that
it looks like that was item C, permit the rear sign to be internally lit versus externally lit and shielded.
One more
So-
time, sir.
The item C on this agenda is to permit the rear sign to be internally lit. That's not applicable any longer. We're not.
Yeah, my understanding is they rejected it last week, so he was going to submit drawings for non-illuminated letters. Yes. For the sketch I just showed them.
Take a look here. Do you know if the size has been?
We
reevaluated?
did drop the size down to 28-inch, just as the front as the rear. Both of those signs are way under square footage of allowance. I understand the code reads that the maximum height of a sign is 24 inches. That's kind of a crazy deal because somebody could have a 24-inch letter and be 50 feet long and still be in code. When you stack the letters and you have a much smaller length on it, I know what your code is, I understand it, but we're requesting the 28-inch over the 24, yes. On both elevations.
Well, it almost sounds like what you think is being proposed isn't what the city thinks is being proposed. So I think those updated plans haven't made it here. And I almost want to ask the question.
Sure.
Should you just go back and make sure that the real request is coming before the board? Because right now, I feel like it's not.
Other than illumination, we'd like to submit as is.
Okay.
Just flat cutout letters. Yes. Non-illuminated on the rear building.
Non-illuminated on the rear.
And it's
And the
non-illuminated.
size of
it's
the
always been-
lettering is different as well.
Smaller,
Or
but
the
still
same.
not in, would not be in compliance, would still need a variance.
Yeah, they're both asked to be 28 inches high instead of 24. Yes, sir.
Director Venus, do we need to amend anything or technically from, approve, is that something we can look at approve with conditions? What's the best way to?
Unless the city attorney has a differing opinion, we advertise for a greater letter height for the rear sign at 33 versus what is being proposed now at 28. So from that perspective, if they were doing the opposite, we would need to go back and re-advertise. And the fact that they've withdrawn the lighting of the rear sign, obviously that's not an issue any longer. Mr. Young?
I have no disagreement with that process.
Does that change your recommendation then for the back? The departments? Am I getting ahead of things here? Or?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of my question is, do
Yeah.
we need to postpone this or can we just make the change?
I guess-
on this?
I'm sorry, I'm not to be rude by any means. I submitted these permits on March 10. Okay, March 10. Okay, Mr. Vogel has sat on this forever. All right, it's not right. All right, I'll be glad to go submit and redo the drawings. I'm sorry, Mr. Quinn didn't submit them, okay? But it's wrong how things are being done. March 10th, I submitted sign permits. And you make me walk in and fill out the permit here at City Hall. I've done this since 1980. There's no complaints, okay? But March 10th, and now I'm standing here with a rejection.
Not a rejection yet. What we're simply asking is, it sounds like we weren't all on the same page. I understand.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to kind of wrap our heads around
Yes, sir.
what you're asking for now has changed. So we have to kind of reevaluate that. Item C is easy. It sounds like you want to proceed. So I guess, I'm sorry, go ahead, Director Benich, if you want to.
Pardon me, I don't
Yeah.
want to interrupt the chair, but
Sure.
obviously you have an option of proceeding forward with the front sign. And considering that nothing's changed there and the
Correct.
department is supporting the requested variance. We supported the variance for Imogene's. The difference in the variance is Imogene's had an icon or a medallion associated with their lettering, which caused it to be the 33 inches versus the 24, or in this case, the 28. You can then postpone the rear sign to accommodate the submittal of accurate information so that you're looking at what is being proposed. Thank you.
I guess my question, Mr. Vunich, could we approve the rear sign with the requirements being 28-inch externally illuminated?
Certainly. Yes.
And the planning department recommended approval for the 28-inch externally illuminated on the front. Now that they're smaller and externally lit for the back, would the planning department recommend approval of that as well? It'd be uniform front and back?
What I guess I won't necessarily answer that question directly. What I will tell you is the property has actually has triple frontage, which means they have the right for two signs. The effectiveness of placing the sign on the rear of the building, I question, but certainly from the standpoint, they have the right of two signs. They're being consistent in their heights now at 28 inches. And certainly the decision on what side of the building it goes is solely theirs. They can have two signs on any side of the building. In terms of does the department support the 28 versus the 33? Certainly it's closer in compliance to the 24. The decision regarding that extra 4 inches solely rests with the board.
I know that's up to us, but I guess I know how long it takes to get things through the city of Wildwood. And I think in the interest of helping the person, if we're going to approve it in 30 days, can we approve it tonight?
So just so the board's clear, I've mentioned we're not perfect, but you know what? We work very hard because once we sign something and it goes out and gets built and it's wrong, nobody's going to listen to the fact that we got it out in a day and everybody was happy about that. They're going to be talking about the fact that it's wrong. So I'll never stand up here and defend the fact that we don't do it quickly. We do it correctly 90.9% of the time. And by the way, SSM Healthcare isn't the only application we have. We process 1,000 permits per year through zoning authorization. That's about 3 or 4 a day.
I have no complaints with
So-
the planning department. You know that. I'm just saying if we're going to approve it in 30 days, can we put the wording in tonight and approve it where it would be the same difference? Less
Certainly,
30
yeah,
days.
as I said, they've reduced the size of the lettering, eliminated the lighting. So yeah, within the purview of the advertisement, you're well within your means to proceed forward and act on both requests.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich.
So to be clear,
Yep.
on the back, you are saying there's no lighted signage.
The letters will not be lit.
The letters will not be lit.
That's correct.
Okay, there's no lighting on the letters. In the letters or on the letter. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Originally submitted was internally lighted letters. You know what that is, I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
They are not, they're flat cutout letters
Okay,
on the wall.
okay, that's the current plan and 28 inches
Yes, sir.
high.
Per the drawing you just have, I just gave you for the roof.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
I just want to be sure.
Yeah.
because-
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other additional comments from the board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
not to interject in the process, but I just want to let you know, I do have a speaker's card from Mr. Petruso.
Oh, absolutely. Is he online or?
No, he's in-
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see there. Yeah, go ahead. Good. Just state your
Mike
name.
Petruso, property owner of 16962. I'm a resident, 16553 Willow Glen Drive,
And your relation to the property.
a property owner.
Do you solemnly swear that this testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr.
Yeah, I just want to
Petruso.
indicate, it sounds like you guys might have had a little bit of question on why we're putting the sign on the backside. Due to limited parking on Manchester Road in front of the building, one being handicap, you only got about 3 spots, right? So the main entrance to SSM's physical therapy, where the reception desk is in the backside of the building, right? So showing potential customers, hey, this is making sure you're going through the right work, right? Then I also know Thomas Lee with the city. There was some questions about the parameters around signs. And I think that they're the identity of a brand new business, right? They are location, right? This is where we're at. This is who we are until we become established, right? Until people can visit multiple times. A sign's very powerful for a new business. And so that is why we're putting one on the backside primarily. Thank you.
So tonight we've been focusing a lot on the concept of hardship.
Mhm.
So help me understand
Yep.
the hardship between a 28 inch, which is not quite in compliance, and a 24 inch. There's just 4 inches there. So what's the hardship between the two?
As far as visual sight, what do you, can you clarify your question as far
Well,
as?
when you seek a variance,
Yes,
you're stating or supposed to state the hardship is why you need the variance. Okay. And so we're just asking the question. Why can't you just stay in compliance with the size of the letters, the 24 inches?
it's a great question.
Thanks.
The sign looks like a postage stamp on the building. I mean, it's so under square foot on what the code would allow normally.
Come up to the microphone.
Okay, the code allows such a much larger sign per square foot on that rear building. Other than the height, you guys put a limitation on height, and it's your deal. I understand that. But if, like, once again, like I said, if SSM was 24 inches tall and 50 feet long and met code, you wouldn't have an issue with it. Okay, so the two letters combined, that might be 12 inches apart, they're stacked and creates a 20-inch overall height. That, what's the hardship? There is no hardship. You're gonna have a tiny sign on a big building.
So you're just saying proportion wise, it
Yes.
doesn't look quite right
Yes, sir.
when it being that small.
Yes.
That's your hardship.
Sure.
We want to call it that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
It looked like coming up towards Manchester Road, because this is the back of the street. There's other signs as well. Would that be a concern that you're trying to get a little bit larger visibility, or
From the Manchester side, sir?
if you're coming up towards Manchester Road? I think there was a sign you took a picture of the sign in the grass there. So there's some other signage. I guess my point is, do you believe that the 4 inches is going to make it more visible, less confusing? Mr. Petrusa was saying that, you know, obviously the sign is powerful. Is that the intent here? I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because the size is changing.
There's no room on that. We might be back in the future to get that white sign, try to get a variance to get a new sign there to match the sidewalk and everything.
Yeah.
But there's no room on that for
Right.
SSM to go.
I guess my question is more of, is the concern, you know, again, we're talking about 4 inches. I know this sounds silly, but it can go both ways. We can say, you know, 4 inches, it's not a big deal, but we can also say, well, then why don't you just go ahead with 24? So I'm just trying to find, is the concern to get as large as possible? Because you did shrink it. So I guess you're in this comfort zone where you think that's larger than, you know, than you require or allowed to have, but you feel that additional inch is going to more visibility, or what's the thinking there?
Yes, I mean, it's going to give us
Okay.
much more visibility.
Yeah.
Also with Ameren just put 2 huge poles right there in front of the front side entrance. I think, yeah, it's going to allow people, it's right there on the corner. People are going to be able to see it better. The one on the back, we went from 33 to 28 because again, it's on the back side. We just want to let people know, hey, this is where we enter. This is the part of this building that SSM occupies. So yeah, I guess it would be to answer your question more precisely, would be a visibility and identity. And
There's other structures back there that you
Yeah.
think are could
Yeah.
detract from.
and I
being able to
personally
find
took
it.
down the Imogene sign and measured it, and
Yeah.
it was over 24.
Any other questions from the board? Any other speakers in the audience, Mr. Newberry?
No, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any final comments? I'm sorry. Would anybody like to hear an oral presentation of the department's report? Seeing none. Any final comments from the Department of Planning?
Well, as noted, the department is supporting the variance request for the front of the building. Clearly, there is a visual obstruction there, and there's been an approved variance in the past that was more substantial. So this would have a lesser impact than that one. As far as the rear of the building, I'll just echo Director Vunich that that's really a matter for this board from the department's perspective. I would just continue to point out that at this point, it's just the recognition of the building. There's not, so far, I have not heard a practical difficulty or hardship. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
I think one of you mentioned, and I apologize, I don't remember, might have been you, Mr. Chair, the proportional component. And obviously at 28 inches, the sign will be smaller in terms of its extent on the rear. And I think proportionally, I think it probably will look better if that is a consideration. Thank you.
Director Vunich. Any final comments from the board? This time we will close the proceeding for a vote. I do have administratively, Director Vunich, if you could assist how we break up A, B, and C. Is it one motion, separate motions? What's the best way to?
Yes, you can do them separately. So just request a motion first for the front sign and the variance associated with it. If there is a second, then a vote, and then do the same on the rear side. Thank you, sir.
In seeing that C hasn't officially been withdrawn, they're okay with, at that point, I assume a denial is okay at that point. Yep. Correct. Yep. At this time, I will call for a motion to approve, a motion to deny, or a motion to approve with conditions, part A of this petition, which is pertaining to the front sign. Do I have a second to that motion?
I second.
Who did the first?
Just to, yeah, we're going to,
I would just interject that when you say non-lighted, you might want to specify not internally lighted or just leave
Yes.
it off altogether because that wasn't the variance request for the front sign.
My motion. The front sign.
I can't hear anything.
It's up.
yeah, just really lean into it.
The motion is to approve the front sign at 28 inches.
We have a second to approve the motion.
I second the approval.
Mr. Van Nest,
Approve.
Mr. Sprunger,
Approve.
Mr. Morris,
Approve.
and Mr. Rubus. And I approve portion A as well. Congratulations, that part is approved. Can I have a motion to approve, to deny, or approve the conditions, part B of this particular petition pertaining to the rear wall size? Do I have to, should I state 28 inches? Yeah, I'm assuming. So let me, do I have a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions? Part B, which deals with the size of the sign being 28 inches, letters being 28 inches.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve item B on the condition that it's 28 inches in height. And well, non-illuminated, not internally lit, not internally illuminated.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have, thank you, Mr. Sprunger. Mr. Morris, how do you vote?
Approve.
Mr. Sprunger,
Approve.
Mr. Van Nest,
Approve.
and Ms. Rubus.
Approve.
And I vote to approve portion B as well, as stated. Lastly, we will go ahead and have a motion to approve, to deny, or approve the conditions, portion C, which is to internally light that rear sign.
I make a motion to deny part C.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Sprunger. Mr. Rubus, how do you vote?
Yay.
Deny. Yep.
To deny.
Mr. Morris,
Deny.
Mr. Sprunger,
Deny.
and Mr. Van Nest.
Deny.
And I vote to deny portion C as well. Congratulations, the first two portions are approved. Thank you. I believe that is the last petition this month. Is that correct? Anything, any other business?
Thank you as always for your service.
This time, we will close the proceeding.
And just as a reminder, we have a concert tomorrow, weather permitting at 6:45. Hope to see